Respect doesn't disappear all at once. It drops in small moments you don't even notice. An INFJ can be fully engaged, open, and patient, and then something subtle happens. A behavior that feels off, inconsistent, or revealing. No argument, no reaction. But internally, something shifts instantly. What most people miss is that INFJs don't lose respect because of big mistakes alone. It's the patterns behind behavior. The way you respond under pressure, the way your words don't match your actions, the way you handle responsibility when no one is watching. These signals don't need repetition. Sometimes one moment is enough. In this video, we're breaking down 6 behaviors INFJs notice that instantly kill respect, and why these moments matter more than anything you say. The subtle actions, the hidden patterns, and the reason respect once lost rarely comes back the same. If you've ever felt someone's energy toward you change without explanation, stay until the end. And subscribe to Brainy Quiet Mind for more insights into the behaviors most people don't realize are being watched. Saying one thing, then acting the opposite without accountability, words stated, actions reversed, no ownership. There is a moment when you say something clearly and then do the exact opposite. Not by accident, not once, but in a way that shows a gap between what you claim and how you move. And for the INFJ, that gap doesn't go unnoticed. It doesn't need explanation. It defines the moment immediately. This isn't about perfection. Everyone makes mistakes. But what follows the contradiction matters more than the contradiction itself. When there is no acknowledgement, no correction, no ownership of the mismatch, the signal becomes stronger. It shows that the words were not anchored in reality. They were convenient, not consistent. And that changes how everything else is perceived. From the outside, the situations might seem small: a broken promise, a shifted position, a decision that doesn't align with what was said before. It can be explained, minimized, even justified. But internally, the INFJ is not evaluating the excuse. They are evaluating the pattern. Does what you say hold under pressure? Does it remain stable when it matters? What makes this powerful is that consistency is the foundation of respect. Words alone don't create it. Actions alone don't define it. It is the alignment between both that builds trust. And when that alignment breaks without accountability, the structure weakens instantly. Over time, this becomes a defining pattern. The INFJ doesn't need repeated contradictions to see the issue. One clear moment without ownership is enough to shift perception, because it suggests that what is said cannot be relied on when it matters most. Because for the INFJ, respect is not about what you promise. It is about whether you stand behind it when it counts. And when words and actions move in opposite directions without acknowledgement, respect doesn't fade slowly, it drops in that exact moment. Avoiding responsibility and shifting blame when confronted is responsibility deflected. Blame redirected, ownership missing. There is a moment when something is clearly addressed, and instead of facing it, the focus moves somewhere else. The situation is brought up directly, the issue is visible, but the response doesn't stay on it. It shifts, it turns outward. It looks for another cause, another person, another reason that removes ownership from the one who created it. This shift happens quickly. The INFJ doesn't need a long explanation to see it. The language changes, the tone adjusts, the responsibility becomes shared or displaced entirely. It wasn't just me. That's not exactly what happened. You're misunderstanding. These responses don't resolve the issue, they move away from it. And that movement becomes the signal. From the outside, it can feel like a normal reaction, a defense, a clarification, a way to explain the situation. But internally, the INFJ is not evaluating the explanation itself. They are observing whether ownership appears or disappears. And when it disappears, something deeper becomes clear. Accountability is not stable. What makes this powerful is that responsibility is a foundation, not a preference. It shows whether someone can face the impact of their actions without needing to protect their image. And when that foundation is missing, the connection loses something essential. Not trust entirely, but respect for how the person handles reality. Over time, this becomes a pattern that is difficult to reverse. The INFJ doesn't expect perfection, but they expect awareness. They expect the ability to say, "This was my part," without redirecting the focus. And when that ability isn't there, the interaction changes. Because for the INFJ, being confronted is not the problem. It's what you do in that moment that defines everything. And when responsibility is avoided and blame is shifted, respect doesn't get questioned. It gets reduced immediately, without needing further proof. Being inconsistent in values depending on who's watching, values shift. Audience changes. Integrity unstable. There is a moment when the same person speaks differently, depending on who is in front of them. One setting, one set of principles. Another setting, a different tone, a different stance, a different version of what they claim to believe. It's subtle at first, easy to dismiss. But for the INFJ, it doesn't stay separate. It connects. This inconsistency isn't about adapting socially. It's about alignment. The INFJ watches whether your core stays the same when the environment changes. Do your values hold when it's inconvenient? Do they remain when there is pressure to fit in? Or do they adjust to gain approval, avoid conflict, or match the dominant presence in the room? These shifts reveal more than the words themselves. From the outside, it can look like flexibility, like social awareness, like knowing how to navigate different situations. But internally, the INFJ is not reading it that way. They are tracking stability. And when your principles change depending on who is present, it signals that those principles are not anchored. They are situational. What makes this powerful is that values are meant to remain consistent across contexts. They don't need to be expressed the same way every time, but they need to exist beneath every version of you. And when that underlying consistency is missing, the interaction begins to feel uncertain. Over time, this creates a clear pattern. The INFJ doesn't rely on one instance. They observe repetition. They notice how your stance shifts across environments, how your tone adapts beyond what is natural, how your alignment changes when different people are involved. Because for the INFJ, respect is built on stability, not rigid behavior, but consistent principles. And when those principles change depending on who is watching, what you stand for no longer feels real. It feels adjustable. Disrespecting others subtly. Tone, attitude, small dismissals. Subtle disrespect. Tone reveals. Small dismissals matter. There is a moment when nothing harsh is said, but something feels off. A slight edge in the voice, a quick interruption, a dismissive glance that passes too fast to call out. On the surface, everything looks acceptable. No clear insult, no obvious conflict. But the underlying message is there, and the INFJ catches it immediately. This kind of disrespect doesn't rely on words. It shows through delivery. The way someone responds without fully listening, the way they minimize what another person says, the way their tone carries just enough superiority to shift the dynamic. These moments are small, but they are consistent. And consistency turns them into a pattern. From the outside, these behaviors are easy to ignore. They don't escalate into arguments. They don't create immediate tension. Most people move past them without giving them weight. But internally, the INFJ is not dismissing them. They are tracking how someone treats others when it doesn't require effort to be respectful. What makes this powerful is that respect is not only shown in major moments. It is revealed in the smallest interactions. When there is nothing to gain, nothing to prove, nothing to defend, how someone speaks, reacts, and responds shows their default state. And subtle disrespect reveals that default clearly. Over time, this becomes a defining signal. The INFJ doesn't need repeated conflict to understand someone's attitude. A series of small dismissals is enough, because those moments show how someone behaves when they believe it won't be noticed or challenged. Because for the INFJs, respect is not measured by how someone acts in important situations. It is measured by how they act in ordinary ones. And when tone, attitude, and small dismissals consistently carry a lack of respect, the conclusion is not delayed. It forms immediately. Lying about small things that didn't need to be lied about small lie, known as necessity, trust reduced. There is a moment when something insignificant is said, and it isn't true. Not a major issue, not something that carries consequences, just a small detail that could have been stated honestly without any problem. And that is exactly why it matters. Because when there is no pressure to lie, but the lie still appears, the signal becomes stronger. This moment doesn't require confrontation. The INFJ doesn't react immediately, doesn't challenge the statement in the moment. They register it. Not the content itself, but the decision behind it. Why create something false when nothing needed to be protected? Why adjust reality when there was no cost to telling it as it is? These questions form quietly, without being spoken. From the outside, the situation feels insignificant. A minor inconsistency, a detail that can be overlooked, something that doesn't affect the outcome. Most people would ignore it completely. But internally, the INFJ is not measuring the size of the lie. They are measuring the willingness to create one without necessity. What makes this powerful is that small lies reveal baseline behavior. When someone lies under pressure, it can be explained. When someone lies to avoid consequence, it can be understood. But when someone lies without needing to, it shows that truth is not their default, it is optional. Over time, this becomes a clear indicator. The INFJ doesn't need repeated deception to see the pattern forming. One unnecessary lie is enough to shift how everything else is interpreted. Because if something small is not handled with honesty, there is no reason to assume something bigger will be. Because for the INFJ, trust is not built on major promises. It is built on small, consistent truth. And when that consistency breaks without reason, respect doesn't fade gradually. It drops in the exact moment the lie wasn't needed, but still chosen. Showing fake confidence that collapses under pressure, confidence projected. Pressure applied, collapse revealed. There is a moment when someone appears completely certain, steady voice, strong posture, clear statements that suggest control. Everything about them signals confidence. But then the pressure changes. A challenge, a question, an unexpected shift, and something breaks. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to expose what was holding it together. This collapse doesn't happen in words first. It happens in structure. The tone becomes less stable, the rhythm loses its natural flow, the certainty starts to adjust itself in real time. What once felt grounded now feels reactive. The INFJ doesn't need to analyze it deeply. They recognize the difference between confidence that is consistent and confidence that requires conditions to exist. From the outside, it can still look controlled. The person may recover quickly, adjust their response, maintain the appearance of stability. But internally, the INFJ has already registered the shift. The confidence was not anchored. It was dependent on the situation staying within a certain range. Once that range changed, so did the person. What makes this powerful is that real confidence does not disappear under pressure. It may adapt, it may pause, it may respond differently, but it doesn't collapse. When it does, it reveals that what was shown before was not stable. It was maintained. Over time, this becomes a clear signal. The INFJ doesn't rely on how someone appears in controlled situations. They observe what happens when control is tested, because that moment shows whether confidence is internal or constructed. Because for the INFJ, respect is built on stability, not performance. And when confidence exists only when everything is predictable, it stops being something to rely on and starts being something that can't hold when it matters most. Ignoring boundaries after they've been clearly shown, boundary set. Line visible. Respect tested. There is a moment when something is made clear, not aggressively, not dramatically, but directly enough to be understood. A limit is expressed, a preference is stated, a line is drawn, and for a brief moment, everything aligns. The message is received, the interaction adjusts, but then it happens again. The same line is crossed as if it was never there. This isn't confusion, it's disregard. The INFJ doesn't expect perfection, but they expect awareness. Once a boundary has been shown, it becomes part of the interaction's structure. And when it's ignored, especially more than once, it signals something deeper than a mistake. It shows that the boundary was not taken seriously enough to be remembered or respected. From the outside, it can be minimized. It can look like a misunderstanding, a small oversight, something that doesn't carry enough weight to matter. But internally, the INFJ is not measuring the size of the action. They are measuring the consistencies of the respect given to what was already made clear. What makes this powerful is repetition. One crossed boundary can be corrected, two can be clarified. But when the same line is crossed again after it has been understood, it stops being accidental. It becomes a pattern of behavior that reflects how much the boundary actually matters to the other person. Over time, this pattern defines the interaction. The INFJ no longer sees the boundary itself as the issue. They see the response to it, because that response reveals whether respect is conditional or consistent. Because for the INFJ, boundaries are not just personal preferences. They are indicators of how someone values the space between people. And when those boundaries are ignored after being clearly shown, respect doesn't get questioned. It gets reduced in that exact moment. Playing victim instead of reflecting on behavior, victim stance. Reflection avoided. Responsibility deflected. There is a moment when something is addressed, and instead of looking inward, the focus turns outward immediately. The situation is clear, the behavior is visible, but the response shifts direction. It becomes about how unfair it feels, how misunderstood it is, how others contributed. Anything except examining the role that was actually played. This shift happens quickly. The tone changes, the narrative adjusts, and the position moves from accountability to defense. The INFJ doesn't react to the emotion itself. They observe the absence of reflection. Because emotion is not the issue, avoidance is. When the situation calls for awareness and ownership, but the response creates distance from both. The signal becomes clear. From the outside, it can feel understandable. Emotions are involved, the situation may be uncomfortable, the reaction can seem human. But internally, the INFJ is not measuring the feeling. They are measuring whether the person can pause, look at their own behavior, and acknowledge it without needing to redirect the focus. What makes this powerful is that reflection is the foundation of growth. It shows whether someone can see themselves clearly, even when it's uncomfortable. And when that ability is replaced with a victim stance, the pattern becomes predictable. The same situations will repeat, not because they are unavoidable, but because they are never fully understood. Over time, this becomes a defining trait. The INFJ doesn't need multiple situations to see it. One clear moment where reflection is replaced by deflection is enough to shift perception, because it reveals how someone handles reality when it doesn't favor them. Because for the INFJ, being in a difficult situation is not what reduces respect. It's how you respond to it. And when the response avoids reflection and moves into a victim position instead, respect doesn't fade slowly. It drops in the moment awareness should have appeared, but didn't, being emotionally reactive instead of self-controlled reaction first. Control missing, stability questioned. There is a moment when something small happens, and the response comes too fast. No pause, no processing, no adjustment. Just an immediate reaction that carries more intensity than the situation requires. It's not the emotion itself that stands out. It's how quickly it takes control. This reaction isn't measured. It doesn't move through awareness before expression. The tone sharpens, the mouth without structure. The response expands beyond the moment. And the INFJ notices the lack of separation between feeling and action. There is no space between what is felt and what is shown. From the outside, it can be dismissed. People get emotional, situations can be stressful, reactions can happen. But internally, the INFJ is not focusing on the emotion. They are observing the absence of control, because emotion is expected, but the ability to manage it is what defines stability. What makes this powerful is consistency. One reaction can be explained, but when emotional responses repeatedly override control, it reveals a pattern. The INFJ doesn't need multiple situations to understand it. The structure is already clear. Feelings leads directly to action without regulation. Over time, this changes how the interaction is perceived. The INFJ is no longer evaluating what is being said in those moments. They are evaluating whether the person can maintain clarity when emotion is present. And when that clarity is missing, predictability disappears. Because for the INFJ, respect is built on stability under pressure. Not the absence of emotion, but the ability to hold it without letting it take control. And when reactions replace regulation, the connection doesn't feel grounded anymore. It feels unpredictable. Acting differently around people to gain approval behavior shifts. Approval sought, authenticity unstable. There is a moment when the same person becomes someone else. Depending on who is in front of them, the tone changes, the opinions adjust, the energy adapts too quickly. It's not natural variation, it's calculated alignment. And the INFJ notices the difference immediately. This shift isn't about social awareness, it's about consistency. The INFJ observes how you carry yourself across different environments. Do your values stay anchored? Does your personality remain recognizable, or does it reshape itself to match expectations, to gain acceptance, to avoid rejection? These changes don't stay separate, they form a pattern. From the outside, it can look like adaptability, like knowing how to fit into different situations. But internally, the INFJ is not reading it that way. They are tracking whether there is a stable core behind those adjustments. And when that core feels absent, the interaction becomes uncertain. What makes this powerful is that approval-based behavior reveals dependency. It shows that the version of yourself being presented is not fixed. It is influenced by who is watching. And when that influence becomes visible, it raises a question about what is real and what is performed. Over time, this becomes a clear signal. The INFJ doesn't need repeated examples to see it. A few consistent shifts across different people are enough, because those moments reveal how much of your behavior is grounded and how much is adjusted for acceptance. Because for the INFJ, respect is built on authenticity, not rigid behavior, but stable identity. And when that identity changes depending on who is present, what you show no longer feels reliable, it feels conditional. Respect doesn't disappear randomly. It drops the moment patterns reveal themselves. not in loud arguments or obvious conflicts, but in small signals, inconsistency, avoidance, subtle disrespect, things most people overlook, but INFJs don't. And once that shift happens, it's not about fixing one moment, it's about what that moment represents. If you've ever felt someone's energy toward you change without explanation, now you understand why. Let me know in the comments which behavior stood out the most, or which one you've seen in real life. And if you want to recognize these signals before respect is lost completely, subscribe to Brainy Quiet Mind, where awareness turns into clarity.